Today, I'm joined by Henry Campbell-Jones, Managing Director at Hornblower Business Brokers. Henry has a wealth of direct experience advising on the sale of facilities management businesses across a range of sizes and sectors. We're looking at what makes a facilities management business genuinely attractive to a buyer, from how contract structure and client mix influence what a buyer is prepared to pay, to the role of self-delivery versus subcontracting, and where owners tend to discover the gaps too late. This conversation covers the factors that either build or quietly erode value in a facilities management business ahead of the sale. Hi, Henry. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Neil. Good to be here.
So when we look at facilities management then, when a buyer looks at a facilities management business, what makes them lean in versus sort of walk away? You know, what's going to attract them more or put them off?
Yeah. Well, I think firstly to sort of look at the different types of activity that facilities managements do. They can be divided into sort of two main sides: sort of hard facilities management, soft facilities management, and from the hard side that includes sort of building maintenance and plumbing and electrical, that sort of thing, as well as heating, ventilation, air conditioning, fire and safety, and the soft side sort of commercial cleaning, security and access, and waste management, and maybe some vending machine sort of maintenance. So all the work is sort of regular, a mix of regular maintenance, as well as some one-off sort of emergency repairs and sort of new installation projects. But what binds it all together and all these activities together, whatever sort of the main core focus of the business is that it requires skilled operatives, skilled engineers to go in and be scheduled to carry out the work with the right equipment at the right time with the right know-how. So what makes buyers lean into a deal is really the people, both the engineers and operatives, but also the management team. And so buyers will look at what the management team really do in terms of, you know, are they managing and scheduling the work each day? Who is the member of the team? Is it the owner, or is it the team that's managing any sort of difficult technical issues that arise with a sort of client's piece of equipment? And who's putting together the costings and quoting for the work? Now, if all those sorts of activities are handled by the management team, or at least sort of some key members of the team, then that is what, rather than the business owner, then that's what really makes buyers lean into the deal.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And are there things that really separate facilities management businesses that will attract premium valuations from those that don't?
Yeah, I think it probably comes down to the maintainability and sort of consistency of future revenues, and that's really what I guess any buyer will look at. But particularly with facilities management, what drives that is is the nature of the revenue and the revenue streams, and how much is regular, repeat, recurring for sort of conducted under sort of maintenance contracts. So the business is in its clients on a day-to-day basis or a regular monthly basis to do preemptive sorts of maintenance work or cleaning, versus the one-off side of the business, which is reactive or sort of one-off projects, which maybe in themselves can be profitable, but they're only as good as the last project, if you see what I mean. And the consistent revenue comes from that sort of contractual sort of maintenance. So that's really where that's what drives a premium value for a facilities management business. You can look at more closely the contracts as well, and the nature of that work, because some companies like to operate on the basis of well, we do a good job, so we're embedded with the client, so there's no need for a contract. But when it comes to a sale, you need some sort of security, comfort, for buyers who are coming in afresh and don't know the clients necessarily on a personal basis in the way that a business owner does. And so you need sort of reasonable notice periods, maybe an annual contract and an annual renewal, to really let any new company or a new buyer sort of embed themselves with the client base. When they come in. What else sort of drives value with facilities management businesses? It's sort of framework agreements with local authorities or large institutions, which will tend to try and have a pool of suppliers that they regularly use, and that typically sort of 3, 4, 5 companies that they have signed up to a framework agreement, which is a way of working, and therefore they can sort of go each time they have a new job, they can go to that small pool of clients. So if a business has those framework agreements in place with its client base, then that represents a secure source of new work for the future.
Makes sense. You've touched a lot there on contract structure. What about sort of client concentration, the self-delivery versus subcontracting? Does that shape what a buyer is willing to pay for the business?
Yeah, no, certainly. The nature and terms of the service contracts do have an impact. And as I said, that if there's a good notice period, then they provide that security for a buyer. Typically, sort of minimum sort of we recommend would be sort of at least a 3 months notice period. That's typically what's achieved in maybe the commercial cleaning side of facilities management. Longer contracts can be agreed for maybe some of the hard aspects of facilities management. With annual contracts in place, or maybe sort of multi-year contracts in place can often be sort of negotiated with clients. So that does represent sort of the upside, and if you don't have that, obviously the downside. But when it comes to customer concentration, that sort of trumps, I think, the contractual nature of the business. So if one client represents, rule of thumb, we recommend no client to represent more than 15% of total revenue. Sometimes that's difficult to achieve, but when they start representing more than, say, sort of 25, a quarter or a third of the business, then that's where it's going to be less attractive to buyers, because there's a bit more risk there in terms of that one client falling out of bed or going elsewhere for whatever reason over the coming years, and therefore a buyer will want to sort of de-risk their acquisition and their offer. It won't necessarily mean a lower headline value, but it might have an impact on the deal structure. And how much a buyer is likely to pay on completion of the deal versus what they put into a deferred amount over 1, 2, 3 years, or even an earn-out structure, which is contingent on that client, on that top client, so remaining in place.
To mitigate their risk, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's right. So, in terms of negotiating a good deal, it's always about sort of recognizing the risks for the buyers and trying to sort of put in place something that's going to sort of address that risk. But also, if you're open to that, then that can mean that you can still get the full value for the business as well.
Makes sense. And over the course of your experience, I'm sure you've had situations where businesses thought they were really attractive and perhaps they weren't as attractive as they thought. What are the things, what things do owners discover through this process that makes their business not as attractive as they were hoping for?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. One's more sort of the personal management side of the business, and the other is more sort of financial, I guess. But I think there's the realization of how much the business is dependent on the owner. And you can always ask the question, well, can you go away for a month without your phone or your email, and the business still be there when you get back? And it's aspects about learning who who's responsible for the maybe scheduling of the work, who's responsible for talking to the key clients, who actually works out how much a job is going to cost and submits the quote. And if there's a framework agreement, who puts together that whole sort of package of paperwork that's required for that sort of agreement. And I guess there's that realization more and more as you start to look at that, as buyers start to ask questions, or we ask questions in preparation for a sale, about what is the role of the owner, in terms of how they will need to be replaced. And so most businesses are sort of valued on a multiple of profitability, a return on investment. And so buyers will look at, well, what is the true maintainable profitability going forward without the owner? And they have to consider, well, how will they replace the owner? If the owner comes in for a couple of hours a week just to see how things are going, that's one thing, and the replacement cost isn't going to be that much, if at all. But if the owner is in there day to day, answering emails, answering calls, for whatever reason, then they're going to sort of be considered as more of a general manager type of role, or a managing director, obviously, which will need a certain salary to replace them. And then that will hit the bottom line profits on which the owner is going to value the business. A second item, which I mentioned is more maybe more purely financial, is that with facilities management businesses, a lot of clients' agreements, payment terms are sort of can be 60 to 90 days. Obviously, it's much better if they can be much shorter than that. Try and get them to 30-day payment, but that's not always possible. And obviously, that represents a bit of a cash flow, can represent a bit of a cash flow issue. And many companies over the years have taken on maybe invoice financing. So when it comes to valuation of a business, buyers will typically look at a multiple of profit, EBITDA, or they might even look at the multiple of annual recurring revenue if there's a lot of sort of maintenance contract work. But that will tend to give what we call an enterprise value, which is cash-free, debt-free. And therefore, any surplus cash that's in the company will tend to get added to the valuation of the deal value. But if there's sort of debt in the company in form of, say, invoice financing, then that can be deducted from that enterprise value. And sometimes that can be a bit of a surprise for sellers. So those are maybe the two main things that can maybe surprise sellers as they go through the process and learn more about valuation and sellability.
Nice. Okay. So if you were a facilities management business owner, and wanting to honestly assess where they stand and improve their position before going to market, are there some key things they should look at? Where would you suggest they start?
Yeah. Well, I think probably take some outside independent advice. So maybe look to a business broker like Hornblower, or a business growth advisor who sort of prepares businesses for sale. But either way, an independent advisor who's seen businesses through the sale process and seen with experience in the facilities management sector. So we always offer sort of an independent look at the company, which will be quite critical of how the business is run, but also we'll highlight the good points that we'll put forward to buyers in order to increase the value. But it is always good to have a good look in the mirror before going to the market, so you sort of can be prepared for what buyers sort of might bring up in negotiations. But also if there are things that might impact the overall sellability value of the business, then maybe you can take some time to put some things in place to address those things.
Lovely. Brilliant. Henry, thank you so much. That was really insightful. Thanks for joining us.
All right, no, pleasure. Well, no, thanks for having me along to talk.